people that don't go to Hopkins can't appreciate the amount of work that we do at JHU. It's not for the faint of heart. We know that because we live through it every day, but it makes you a better employee and it makes you a better leader when you go, when you have to run that gauntlet every day and and deal with the pressures and the stress that students at Hopkins have to deal with. So, that's certainly they say iron sharpens iron, and the fire at Hopkins is pretty hot sometimes, but the good news is that once you get out into the business world, it pays off in huge dividends.
Welcome to When You Grow Up, the podcast for conversations between students with goals and the people who have already achieved them. Brought to you by Hopkins Connect at Johns Hopkins University. In this podcast, we match students for a conversation with their dream mentor. Here's our student host for today's episode.
Hello, my name is Veet Zaveri, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I'm currently a master's student at Hopkins studying computer science, and today I'm speaking with Rob Rowello.
And hi, my name is Rob Rowello. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm currently a global vice president of value services at Oracle. And when I was at JHU, I graduated in 1995 with a BS in electrical engineering. You're listening to the
When You Grow Up podcast. All right, Rob, it's nice to be talking with you today. So start off, could you tell me a bit about your story and how you got to the position where you're at right now with Oracle?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Veet, nice to meet you. Thank you for having me on the show today. So I went to Johns Hopkins from 1991 to 1995, studied electrical engineering, graduated in 95, and after graduation went to work in the Washington, D.C. area as a satellite design engineer working for the U.S. Navy. Spent 2 years doing design work, really enjoyed it. It was very interesting. But then decided that I wanted to really take my career in more of a managerial track, applied to business school, and then got into MIT Sloan School of Management, where I pursued my MBA. After business school, I went into management consulting, where I worked at a small boutique consulting firm in Boston called PRTM Management Consulting, where we focused on operation strategy. I spent a lot of my time working in the telecom industry, working with carriers around the world and helping to identify their rollout strategies for wireless networks, for fiber. And if you think back to where we were back in the early 2000s, this was sort of the, really boom times of, the dot-com era where, telecom companies were rolling out infrastructure really, really quickly. After PRTM, I then took a job at Comcast Cable, where I was a vice president of customer service. And that was actually one of my more interesting jobs that I've had. I felt like a high school principal where I had 500 people reporting to me. My territory was South Jersey, from Trenton to Cape May, to the very tip of the Cape. And those 500 people basically sat on the phones all day and took inbound phone calls from cranky customers that wanted to either, complain about their bill or disconnect their service, or new customers that wanted to sign up for a new service. So while I was there, we had a very poorly performing call center that was a product of multiple acquisitions. And under my leadership, we rolled out new processes, new tools, new systems to help gain efficiencies, build and boost the morale of the team. And we ended up becoming one of the top performing call centers when I left after 3 years. I then took a job at Cisco, where I led their telecom consulting practice. And for me, that was actually an interesting shift of gears. I went away from working with telecom providers that were more service centric to working with an equipment provider that was hardware centric. And it was a really good chance for me to take some of what I learned as an engineer and actually apply my business skills to really work with Cisco's customers to think through new services, new offerings that they can bring to bear with Cisco's technology. My job was basically a customer-facing strategist. And then after Cisco, I worked for a firm called Ciena, which was a competitor of Cisco's. They're actually based in Baltimore. And then after Ciena, I had a chance to lead a digital transformation practice at Cognizant, which is a large Indian-based global systems integrator. And in that role, we had a chance to work with Cognizant's largest clients, help them think through how they wanted to transform their businesses using technologies like cloud and other emerging technologies. And now I'm at Oracle, and it's a very interesting time to be in the enterprise software space. I lead a global team where we are basically enabling our sales force to work strategically with our customers to help them think creatively about how they can solve their business problems using Oracle's technology. So, I'm sort of at the nexus between where technology ends and where business begins. And obviously, decisions, very, very expensive decisions are made every day at the corporate level to invest in the right technologies that can either be a differentiator or can be a source of operational improvement for a business. And we're there to help our customers every step of the way. So that's a bit about my history. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's how I got to where I am.
Right. That sounds great. Yeah. Certainly have a lot of leadership experiences, especially in a vast number of verticals. Um, and so I guess going back towards your origins, though, were there any surprising aspects from your degree or technical roles, like your network engineer job, that motivated you to pursue management or leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I will say there is a natural link between engineering and business. And you see a lot of engineers that have taken the leap to go from a traditional design role or a product management or a project management role into a business role. When I went to business school at MIT, I would say probably 60% of my classmates had an engineering background. So that's what tech companies want. Tech companies want people that have a technical acumen that can speak the language, that can go toe to toe with other engineers, but also understand how to make decisions, how the investment cycle works, how customers buy from your company, how to build that intimacy. So, it's such a natural linkage between engineering and business, and it took me a while to really appreciate that and learn that. And I will say, going to Hopkins, especially in the early '90s, I was at Hopkins basically during the pre-internet era. I remember walking across campus, and I'm dating myself here, to the computer lab where we didn't have laptops at that time. That was not a common occurrence. Wi-Fi was not a thing. So we had to use basically shared resources in our computer labs to get things done. But working at Hopkins, during those 4 years, it's a tough place, and it taught me how to work hard. It taught me the rigors of being in such a challenging environment. And I can tell you firsthandly, having been out in the workforce and having gone to other schools, people that don't go to Hopkins can't appreciate the amount of work that we do at JHU. It's not for the faint of heart. We know that because we live through it every day, but it makes you a better employee and it makes you a better leader when you go, when you have to run that gauntlet every day and deal with the pressures and the stress that students at Hopkins have to deal with. So, that's certainly, they say iron sharpens iron, and the fire at Hopkins is pretty hot sometimes, but the good news is that once you get out into the business world, it pays off in huge dividends.
Yeah, I certainly agree. At least so far in my experience too, Hopkins has been academically rigorous for sure. So do you think that your technical and engineering origins trained you in ways that made you uniquely positioned to scale up in management and leadership as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you were to ask me today, can I do a Laplace transform or can I do a Fourier transform? No, I mean, my days of doing, differential equations in Calc 3 are over. But what it did teach me was how to solve problems, how to be rigorous. It teaches you logic, and those are skills that are going to stay with you, throughout your career. I mean, I'm, 27 years, post JHU at this point. A lot of the nuts and bolts that I learned in, my signals and systems class, I remember the concepts, but put a math equation in front of me with gobs of Greek symbols, I'll probably stare at it for an hour. But it teaches you the discipline, it teaches you how to work hard, the logic, and those problem solving skills are exactly what you need. It's your approach to problem solving that will separate you as a leader. And the one thing I will say is effective leaders in today's business environment need to be quantitative. Because if you can't quantify a solution to a problem, if you can't quantify the problem itself, you have no chance of actually articulating what the solution is. So, having that quantitative background, having that rigor, that structure to your thinking, that makes all the difference in the business world.
Right. Yeah. And I really like how you mentioned that problem solving aspect. It's also one of the reasons that attracted me towards computer science and engineering. Um, so those transitions that you mentioned earlier, what did those transitions mean to you, especially in terms of growing as a leader, moving through multiple verticals from the US Navy to telecommunications, healthcare, retail, banking, and so on?
Yeah, I would say early in my career, especially being a young, engineer straight out of Hopkins, and I graduated fairly young. I graduated, when I was in my early 20s. So, um, I was very eager to deliver client value, and that's pretty much what you want to do as a young engineer. You want to just work hard, deliver value, satisfy your client, do great work for your boss. I mean, so your eagerness to deliver is incredibly acute at that young of an age. As I began to grow into my career, the old adage is, work smarter, not harder, but you learn where you can gain points of leverage and how you can lead and motivate other people to basically give you the scale that you need to achieve bigger results. So the hardest transition for me was learning that I can't do it all myself. And I think that we're all taught, as engineers, as problem solvers, that we've got the ability to solve a problem on our own. And the thing that is probably the most true as grow in your career as a manager, as a director, as a VP and beyond, is that you need to rely on other people and you need to motivate and inspire other people to collectively deliver the results that are best for the company. So, that transition was pretty hard. And some people get it, some people don't. But I will say, focusing on that transition was important for me, and I'm sure it's going to be important for a lot of folks that are listening to this call. As I moved through multiple verticals, so I had a chance to work in industries like the telecommunications industry. I worked in media, entertainment, healthcare, financial services, banking, retail. So I've covered the gamut throughout my management consulting career, and also as I've gotten, farther along in my executive career at companies like Cognizant and Oracle. What's interesting is that the problems that you see in one industry are pretty common in other industries. And where things tend to fall apart and why companies don't achieve results is really a lack of vision and a lack of leadership. Now, every industry has its own unique nuances, its own unique KPIs. So for example, the retail industry, they look at, things like, inventory management, days of inventory, obviously, that's a big metric for them because they're holding on to, perishable things like clothes that go out of fashion. And if they don't sell them within a certain cycle time, they have to eat that as a loss. Telecom, it's a subscription business. They're worried about, subscriber growth and ARPU and, things like that. So every industry's got its own unique, challenges and nuances. But the biggest thing is, focusing on creating a vision, holding people accountable, and using, your skill as a leader to, and I always say this, it's have your North Star, understand what's important to you, what you value the most, and don't deviate from that. My North Star tends to be around doing what's right for the company, doing what's right for my employees, and doing what's right for my customer. And as long as I stick to those three values, it doesn't matter what I personally think. It doesn't matter what any of my coworkers personally think. We're here to do those three things. So if I stick to that North Star, things tend to fall in place. And I always, usually take the moral high ground when it comes to focusing on those three things.
It's great to hear, especially being able to stick to your beliefs and core values as a leader and using that as your North Star to help accomplish those goals that you want to accomplish. So I would say, as a leader, it sounds like you've seen a lot, especially, for example, taking your role at Cognizant for one, where you led like a diverse consulting team of strategists, social scientists, engineers, etc. Um, what would you say diversity means to your vision of the future of work in value selling and cloud strategy at Oracle?
Yeah, that's a great question, Veet. So when I was at Cognizant, we had a very diverse team, and it was diverse in multiple aspects. So, we had a lot of diversity of thought and expertise. So my team, I had cloud engineers, architects, technical people. I also had project managers. I had strategy consultants, people that did lots of complementary things, but my job was sort of, ringleader of the circus to bring it all together and to orchestrate everyone to work together towards a common goal and a purpose. But we also had a very, socially diverse team as well. And, that is equally as important to make sure that you're attracting people with different worldviews, different points of view, different backgrounds, because as you tackle tough challenges in the business world, it's important to have different perspectives because you need to see things from different angles. That's where companies get in trouble. When I've seen, major problems happen at companies that, were my clients, it's because they didn't have enough diversity of thought. They didn't have enough diversity sitting around the table to really look at a problem from different angles, to put everything on the table and to identify a solution that, was stress tested. And that's so important to stress test, what you put out there. Um, so my work at Cognizant, I led a group that was focused on transformation and strategy. And that was interesting because over the last 10 years, I mean, probably since my career ever started and, probably until the end of time, businesses are going to transform themselves, whether it's a step level change in technology going, as we entered the internet era in the early 2000s, obviously we had the mobility era hit us in the 2010s. Now we're in the cloud era. And, businesses are taking advantage of technology and using that to transform their businesses to get more efficient, to do things cheaper, to do things more effectively, to partner with their ecosystem better, to align with their customers better. So where we're seeing a pivot right now, a huge pivot, obviously, is around the cloud. And lots of our customers today, my customers today, historically have invested in large on-premise infrastructure and application investments. And as the world continues to move towards a services-based model, it doesn't make economic sense anymore to make those investments in infrastructure. Nobody's buying data centers anymore. I mean, there may be some industries like financial services where they've got security needs or, some risk, some lawyer telling them that they have to. But by and large, everybody is convinced that they can take advantage of the cost benefits of the cloud and buy their infrastructure as a utility or as a service. So, we were working with clients to quantify and understand what that shift meant. And it wasn't just a dollars and cents transformation. Obviously anybody can build an Excel spreadsheet and say, yep, you're spending, $100 million today, with your on-premise data center, you can save $60 million by moving to Amazon or Oracle. But that's really not the whole story. The whole story is you have an organization within your four walls. If you're a large bank, you've got probably an IT organization that might have 1,000 people in it. They're all trained to do certain things in a certain way. They may be trained to manage hardware, manage networks, et cetera. As you pivot towards a new cloud-based model, now you need to rethink about, who do I need? Are these the right people? Do I need to upskill them? Do I need to retrain them? Do I need to bring in new talent into my organization that I haven't thought of before? And then you throw in the whole, pandemic that we just had 3 years ago. And now we've got this massive shift and everybody working from home and, people working remotely. And, I've got employees that are hundreds of miles away from their nearest office and they're working quite effectively. It changes everything because now you can find talent that you can find the talent that you need in pockets that you couldn't find before. It created such a flat world where, the whole race for talent is truly global. So interesting time. I mean, companies are going through this transformation right now, along a technical and HR, a financial dimension, and they need help. I mean, they're operating in a world where they were successful 5 years ago. The world changed dramatically over the last 3 years, and they need expertise. They need Hopkins people to help them think through what that means.
Right. Yeah, I agree with all of that. Especially how companies can find a large diversity of top talent now, um, a pool of top talent because of remote work and other innovations with technology so far. And so, what would you say are some strategies that help you create synergy among those differences on your team, that helped encourage innovation to solve complex problems and move forward with tangible but meaningful ways?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, Veet. I mean, the biggest thing that organizations need under a leader is they need a vision. They need a reason to believe in what they're doing. So that's my job. My job as a leader, of a sizable group is I set the vision and the direction. And it's not just me. I mean, I work with my leadership team and collectively we're identifying what are we doing? What is the vision of what we're doing? Why is it valuable to our organization? And what purpose does everyone in this organization, fill in order to execute against that vision? That's so important because I've been on the other side of the fence where I've worked for leaders where that vision, that purpose was not clearly articulated. And you kind of go through it's almost like you're a jellyfish. You're just sort of floating through and you don't know where you're going or what you're doing. If your job doesn't have purpose, getting up in the morning and doing it is a struggle. So, I want to make sure that everybody in my organization knows what their purpose is, why we're doing what we're doing, why it's important, why it's relevant. And then the rest of that all falls into place. So once you have that vector, going back to engineering terms, I mean, once you establish that direction, that vector, getting the organization aligned around the vector is pretty easy. Then the diversity comes in. Okay, now, we can agree to disagree on whether we're going to follow a straight line or whether we're going to, tack right, tack left to get to the ultimate destination. But we all know where we're going, and that's the most important part. But we could choose to, go uphill, downhill, we can go off-road if we want to, but that's where the diversity, that's where a lot of the fun happens, but we've all got to agree on what the end state is.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So it sounds like purpose is a big motivator and driver of helping to create that synergy among the members of your team. So I guess that really helps segue into the next question, which was what are some personal core beliefs and values as a leader that you have? I guess I'll share a few of mine before. So when it comes to being a leader, I think a couple of my values include embracing communication by being both like a good listener and speaker and having the ability to help encourage, motivate, and guide others and to think or act in a certain way to achieve certain goals. So that's why I wanted to ask, what are some personal core belief and values as a leader that you have?
Yeah, that's another great question, Veet. So, I agree with communication. I think it all starts with communication. And I encourage my team, if you have any problem, any question, you can come to me directly. Farther down in the organization, you should be able to approach your manager directly. If you have a problem with that, then you can come to me and we will sort that out. But I want communication to occur freely and openly. The second thing that is my one of my core beliefs is, and this comes back from Hopkins, I expect people to work hard. I don't expect people to give, a mediocre effort. And I'm sorry, that is, I guess that was sort of beaten into me as an engineering major at Hopkins, but working hard is table stakes. Now, if you don't have the skills or the tools that you need to be successful in your job, we can fix that. But I expect a very strong effort. And I lead by example. So I will work just as hard as anyone else in my organization. I will put in as many hours as anyone else in my organization. And, my work ethic will never be questioned. What I also do is I hold my teams accountable. So, you know, we all establish what that vector is. This is the purpose and the mission of our team, the vision of our team. But we're going to go off and we're going to pursue that aggressively and we're going to work hard. And I expect maximum effort and I also expect results. So if we agree that we're going to do something, I'm going to check in with you and make sure that we're doing that. And accountability ensures the most important thing to being a leader, and that's fairness. I don't treat one person differently than the other. I have 5 kids at home. I love them all equally. I don't play favorites. And you have to sort of apply that same, that same mentality in the business world. I hold people accountable to my standard of work. I hold people accountable to the results that we jointly agree to. And, some people are not comfortable with that level of accountability, and that's okay. There are other places to go work, but if you're going to work on my team, you're going to work hard and you're going to basically do, what we agree that you're going to do. So those are some core beliefs, but I also believe in empathy for the individual. So, my biggest priorities are I am a strong advocate for all the people within Oracle, specifically the people on my team and my organization. I will go to bat for anyone. I will, always be there as their champion. My job is to make sure that they feel like they're included, like they are welcome, like they've got, a strong environment, a good environment to work. And if they don't feel like they have that environment, that is a personal reflection on me and my leadership, and I will address that. The second thing is I always stand by what we are doing for our customers. So, my other personal belief is that businesses don't exist, for things that are not customer focused. Our job is to sell something valuable to our customers. Our job is to make sure that our customers are receiving what they paid their hard-earned money for. And if we're not doing that, if we're not focusing on the customer, then we're not doing our job. So, I'm maniacal about customer focus as well. So those are some of my core beliefs. I mean, that should give you a little bit of an insight into who I am as a leader. I try to be fair as possible, and fairness and equality all boils down to holding people accountable for results. And it's not personal. We're here to do a job. I take personalities out of it, and we look at results, we measure it.
Right. Those are some really strong personal core beliefs and values that I would also agree with as well. Um, and so, what are some ways that those personal core beliefs and values push you to lead better in driving high performance when you're up against a complex challenge such as navigating uncertainty, maybe difficult personalities, or even resistance to change?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of pieces there. So, I mean, let me unpack this one by one. So, so up against complex challenges, such as navigating crises or uncertainty at any point in your career, I don't care if you're, the newest, hire fresh out of college, or if you've got, 40 years under your belt, you're going to hit crisis mode where, things don't necessarily go as planned. You've got a curveball that comes your way, you need to deal with that uncertainty. What's been important for me, and, it's taken some time to learn this, but, you know, doing what's right and, doing what's good. So there's a difference between doing what's right, and there's a difference between doing what's good. And I try to do both. And there's always a tendency that when you face a crisis, you can take a shortcut. I mean, shortcuts do exist. You can sort of skirt the issue, do the wrong thing for the customer. You can, do the wrong thing that's not in the best interest of your employees. That's not the right way to do things. The right way to do things is to tackle problems head on, make difficult decisions, have enough fortitude where you're comfortable standing on your own 2 feet when you have to make a tough call. But again, it boils down to, your core beliefs and values as a leader, and how you can, use those core beliefs and values to, to give you the strength that you need to get through those situations. With difficult personalities, so that's sort of part of the job. It's part for the course. When you're in a leadership role in a company like Oracle, and we all work with difficult personalities. I mean, I'm sure Veet, you see difficult personalities, at Hopkins every day. The key here is just to put the personalities aside, focus on the job, focus on the outcome, focus on what needs to be accomplished. And usually, if you can focus on the outcome and what needs to be accomplished, personalities sort of fall by the wayside. Now, that doesn't take into account, instances where you have people that are doing things that are, either, things that are unproductive to other employees. I mean, if I see that happening, I mean, if employees are doing things that, put other employees in a difficult or compromised position or create a hostile work environment, then obviously we've got to deal with that completely differently and, and work, with our human resources department to eliminate those problems. But by and large, when you're just talking about personality clashes, routine clashes to accomplish a goal, focus on the goal, and I've seen things usually sort themselves out. Cultural stagnation, that's an interesting one. So working and I've had a chance to work at organizations that were very new and had very ambitious growth oriented cultures, and I've had a chance to work for corporations, like the one that I'm currently employed at now, that have been around for 40 years, and they're founder founded. I mean, we've got a very prominent founder in Larry who founded Oracle back in the 80s. What's interesting is that companies tend to grow at different paces, but cultures do evolve. And um, I'll focus specifically on the culture of my team. What I try to do is I just took on a new role at Oracle about 7 months ago, and when I came into this role, there was some, I mean, there was a little bit of discontent. I mean, certainly there were some morale issues, but my job was to get out in front of each of the individual teams. I spent time one-on-one with them. I spent time talking to employees directly and sort of letting the air out of the balloon. And my message to everyone was, we're going to create a culture here that we're going to be proud of. And it's going to be, again, a culture based on open communication, inclusiveness. We're going to have common goals and values. We're going to have, that North Star that we're all aligned against. And people started seeing me walking the walk, walking the talk. And that helped to build some more confidence, and the culture eventually changes over time. So cultural stagnation, I mean, again, that just points back to leadership. And if you're effective as a leader, if you communicate, if you don't have hubris or arrogance, you're willing to, meet with all levels within your organization, you can break down those barriers and actually move culture in the right direction fairly quickly. And resistance to change. That's one that I deal with very frequently, both as a working in a company, like mine, and also as a consultant working with other companies as an advisor. And resistance to change basically is rooted in fear of the unknown. So when people fear the unknown, when they don't understand what's ahead, they become resistant to change. And the key to getting people to let their guard down and to possibly accept change is to de-risk that fear of the unknown. So be convincing, show what the future could look like, create a compelling proposition for them. Because if people see the future, if they believe in the future, if they don't see it as a scary thing, then it becomes something that they're comfortable with. And the key is to get people aligned with you. There are lots of management, articles out there about how, organizations can overcome change. I mean, I'm not going to get into that here, but one of the things that I also found effective was find your champions. I mean, there are champions within any organization that may be a bit more forward thinking. They're on, the opposite side of the bell curve when it comes to accepting change. Those people can be very, very valuable assets or allies to help you progress your agenda along. And you need to get more people in the boat. So over time, those allies, those assets that you have out there, they're going to basically be magnets to bring other people in. And then you have a tipping effect where now the change doesn't become as scary. More people are on board. You've got half the organization in the boat, and now you're well on your way. So, there's ways to do it. But, again, it all boils down to making things less scary for people. And, that's why people dig their heels in.
Right. That's definitely a great strategy, especially helping to de-risk that fear of the unknown, because definitely lots of not maybe not just for working in the being out in the workforce, but also for students, it can be an issue as well, getting over that or trying to overcome that resistance of change. So, I know you mentioned a bit about your work with Oracle. So, what would you say, what do you value most about your work in cloud transformation and strategy, and how did that contribute to your leadership and vision for value selling at Oracle?
Yeah, that's a good question, Veet. So cloud transformation, I mean, obviously that is where companies are at the moment. We've seen companies go through, the internet era, they've gone through the mobility era, and now we're at the cloud transformation era. That's the next big step. So companies are taking that step. They're moving, their crown jewels. I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when cloud was first introduced in the market, with Amazon being the first to do it was largely a development tool. I mean, you saw coders and developers move their, little DevOps projects out to the cloud, and it was a chance to collaborate, and you could pick and choose your code, your code bases from GitHub. We're beyond that now. This isn't just a science experiment. Cloud is where enterprises are going to put mission critical applications into those shared resources. I mean, customer facing information. We've got hospitals and healthcare systems that are putting patient information in the cloud. I never thought we'd get to that point where, companies, where banks like Citibank would be moving, transaction information into a public cloud platform, but that's where we are right now. So, the transformation's underway. The business benefits, the economic benefits are pretty obvious. Now, how does that translate into value realization? So what I do at Oracle is my job is I lead a team of people that works with our sellers to communicate the value of Oracle's products and services to our customers. So Oracle, and I'm not here to give a sales pitch for Oracle. You guys can read the website, but Oracle sells databases. That's where the company grew up, selling databases since the mid 80s. But as we've grown up, we now have enterprise software. So we sell ERP systems, human capital management systems, customer experience systems. So we have a solution called Fusion. We still have a legacy system called JD Edwards that a lot of companies still use. We bought NetSuite a couple of years ago, which is really focused down market on the medium business side. And in addition to those applications, we actually have a cloud business. So we are a hyperscale provider of cloud technology, just like Azure, just like AWS, just like Google. And we provide infrastructure as a service, but more importantly, we provide platform as a service assets to businesses where if you want to move your applications out of your data center, you can port them, put them on whatever flavor of Linux you want, put them in our cloud, and we will run that and maintain that for you. And if oh, by the way, you're running on Oracle database, we'll do all the patching and the upgrading. So that's what we do. And our value selling team is working with customers. I was just in New York about a week and a half ago, meeting with the CEO of Citibank, and we're talking to them about taking portions of what they do and making a shift over to the cloud. So, we've got companies out there that are actively looking at, what does this mean? How much money can I save? How much headcount can I theoretically, repurpose? I want to, take my existing IT team and I want to do bigger and better things with them. I don't want them to just be, folks that keep the lights on in my data center. Can I reuse these people? Can I retrain them to help me grow, to help me innovate, to help me do different things? And also, how can I grow my revenue? So, in the banking industry, we've heard about all these fintech companies that didn't exist 5 years ago. I've got, kids that are in college, and when I send them money, I Venmo them money. Venmo didn't exist 5 years ago. 5 years ago, if I wanted to send my kids money, I would either, have to write them a check or transfer money through my bank. And, now with Venmo, it's as easy as sending a text message. Well, all of these fintech players that have now entered the space now need to integrate with your existing financial services providers. And these companies aren't building their platforms on legacy architecture. Venmo was born in the cloud. Other new banks are born in the cloud. And, so that's where we are as a business community. We've got to figure out how to take these new born in the cloud, innovative things and get them to work with a lot of the dinosauric stuff that's out there. And the easiest way to do that is pull it all into the cloud, create a common data infrastructure, a common data architecture, and break down those barriers so that we can share data seamlessly, across this ecosystem. Now, it's a lot of risk to doing that. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's if I were the CIO of a Wall Street bank, I'm not sleeping easy, knowing my data is sitting in a public cloud, but but it's where we are right now, and we're gonna continue to push that envelope. I mean, it's exciting news. I mean, Veet, especially for somebody like you coming out of Hopkins with a computer science degree, you can write your own ticket coming out of Hopkins these days. I mean, you know, my first job coming out of my first job coming out of Hopkins is a double E. I made $37,000 a year. I think now we're adding zeros to that. So it's good for you guys.
Great. Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's truly incredible how like cloud transformation is taking over. Even with my current internship, I've had the opportunity to work with some cloud related software, especially like for databases. And it's just really nice to know that that through this cloud, we don't have to worry about as much maintenance on um on the IT side of it all.
Well,
So
yeah, and you also don't need to worry about scalability. I mean, if your business or if your application takes off and you grow from, 50,000 hits a day to 5 million hits a day, you could just add more resources with the click of a button. I mean, obviously there's a cost associated with it, but before you had to order servers from Dell and wait 6 weeks for them to come in, and you had to put them in a rack, and network, you had to go to your local telco and have them increase your bandwidth coming into your data center. Now you just push a button and boom, you've got resources at your fingertips. It's truly, truly, truly unbelievable.
right, totally agree with all that. Yeah. Um and so I want to switch gears back into your time with Comcast. So I saw that at Comcast, for example, you had reduced like operating expenses by 2 million annually and without any reduction in headcount, which is pretty amazing. I was just want to dig deeper into what your thought process is on like developing strategies to create cost-driven solutions.
Yeah, I mean, so it gets back to, again, those core principles. My belief, and when I first walked into that environment, that operation at Comcast, I ran a call center. I mean, we had people on phones with headsets on answering phone calls every day, and they were miserable. They hated it. They were on the phone for 10, 15 minutes at a time. And the reason why they were miserable is because they felt like they did not have the right tools to do their job. They didn't have access to information. They couldn't answer the customer's question, and they were frustrating the customer. So by giving them the right tools, by giving them the right information systems, by giving them the right coaching, the right training, the right, you name it, we enabled them to be more successful and to be more efficient. So instead of taking 15 minutes to address a customer's problem, we can get it done in 8 minutes or 6 minutes. So that's where things started to take hold. By making people's jobs easier, it also made the customer's experience better. It also reduced costs, and it was a win-win-win for everybody. It was a win for the company, a win for the employee, a win for the customer, just by fixing operations, by not doing stupid things and by being efficient. It was a huge domino effect. So those knock-on effects do exist. I mean, you can find those win-win-win scenarios in business every day, and where we're at right now is, with technology, we're making things more effective. Who would have thought 10 years ago that we would be sitting on Zoom calls looking at a high definition video image in real time, talking to other people anywhere in the world and being able to do business without having to get on a plane and go anywhere? I certainly wouldn't have thought that, but that's what technology does. I mean, technology breaks down barriers, makes things more effective. I mean, we have seen, the pandemic sucked. I mean, don't get me wrong. Working from home was awful. Wearing a mask was awful. I don't ever want to go back to 2020 and relive that. But what we learned over the last 3 years, especially as technologists and entrepreneurs and innovators, we saw gains in technological advancement over the last 3 years that we may never see in our lifetime. So there was a lot of good that came out of this, and it pushed a lot of people to think differently because we had to. So, in one way, I'm kind of grateful that we had this pandemic because it really put technology at the forefront because we couldn't be humans. We had to be, creatures behind the screen. But here we are now, and now we're living with it, which is good. I mean, I think we're learning how to coexist with the physical world and the technical world, and it's a good blend. I still like working from home. I don't mind it.
Right. I agree. Yeah, the whole like especially during the pandemic when especially for students too, we had to deal with online courses or online classes. And now with the uprising of asynchronous courses, um, it just makes education a lot more accessible to other people as well, to other students that may have conflicting schedules and whatnot.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. It raises the question about why does the cost of education keep going up? You would think that with all this technology, we should start to see the cost go down, and that's another talk. I'll talk to you about that in a couple of weeks. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that day where education truly becomes a service that anybody can access anywhere in the world. Why do you need to be in Baltimore to get a Hopkins education? Why do you need to be in Boston to get a Harvard education? You should be able to access those professors. That's that camaraderie, the inner workings of your working teams. That should be able to happen anywhere in the world. And we're getting close. We're getting there. So I I think at some point the monopoly that the Ivy League and other prestigious schools have on, education, that's going to erode very fast because the playing field's completely even now. But we'll talk about that in 5 years.
Right, right. So to close this off, do you have any advice for students pursuing graduate school and how to make the most out of it?
Oh boy. So first of all, it is a finite process. So if you're struggling with graduate school right now and you think that life is rough and you can't get through this, you will get through this. I mean, it's doable. If I can do it, if I can get a master's degree from MIT, anybody can get, you know, a degree from anywhere. So trust me. But what I will tell you is stick it out, enjoy being in school, because this is probably one of the few periods of your life where you can truly be an intellectual, solve problems for academic purposes, for intellectual sake. When you get into the business world, you're solving problems for specific purposes, and that's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. I mean, when you're in school, you can think freely about things. When you're in business, your job's to do your job, and whatever your job may be. But the other thing is, don't be afraid to make mistakes. So we live in a world right now. I mean, especially coming from Hopkins, everybody there is a type A personality. Everybody's, a perfectionist, 1560 SATs or whatever they're at now. I mean, so don't worry about failing. It's okay to fail. It's okay to fall. And, this in computer science. Fail fast. The whole goal right now is to fail fast. Make your mistake, get it over with, get back on the horse and keep going. But don't sit there and say, oh my God, I made a mistake. It's okay. Making a mistake is great. Get it done, get it over with, and get back on your horse. Because too many people fail and they sit there and they wallow over it. And there's no time for that. Just fail fast and move on. So that's my biggest advice right now.
Right, that's great advice. Yeah, especially in computer science, where it definitely requires a lot of patience, especially when you're debugging or any sort of like technical related challenge over being able to overcome that. So
Yeah,
great.
you're never going to get it right on the first try. I mean, Veet, I could ask you the same question. How many times have you ever written code and gotten it right on the first time? Probably rarely, if ever. So,
Right,
yeah.
right. That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Rob. I really appreciate it. It's been an amazing conversation, and hopefully the audience enjoys it too, because there's a ton of insight and wisdom that was shared today. So, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's always great to come back to Hopkins. I love the place. I will always there's always a soft spot in my heart for JHU. Go Jays, although our lacrosse team's not doing so well this year, but that's okay.
You have been listening to When You Grow Up, the podcast for conversations between students with goals and the people who have already achieved them. Thank you to our When You Grow Up podcast student team and all the people who make this podcast possible, including our editors, Thomas Nishimoto and Josh Felton, our relationship associates, Camille Blake and Laura Flynn, our marketing coordinator, Himanshi Sharma, our project manager, Ben Stevens, our host students, and all of our guests.